the day or two before Rosh Hashanah. 250 students are going to come for the first night of Rosh Hashanah dinner. We don't fit in our Chabad house. We have a tent, which we threw up in the parking lot, which never came down because that's our ballroom, till the permanent building will be graced with some funding to be constructed, etc. So things are really hectic and busy. And I don't usually answer the phone when I can't talk and I can't hear So I don't know why I picked up the phone. It rang right in my ear, and I guess I would rather the phone. One kid was on my foot, one kid was hanging, students were over peeling, chopping. It was full-on chaos. And this very professional-sounding woman is on the other end, and she introduces herself. I don't even remember what her name was. She tells me she's a journalist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and they're doing a piece in honor of, the New Year or the holiday season or whatever it was, on women in different faiths, and how their role has evolved throughout time according to different faith communities. And could I speak to her and present a little bit that she could, document and put into her article about the Jewish faith and how women's roles have evolved and changed in, modern times, etc. And she does have a deadline. It's in 2 days, so, and I'm like looking around and I'm like, oh my gosh, the Jewish woman's role. And I'm like, if she saw me skidding on potato peels and, what was going on in my kitchen, she probably would have hung up before she introduced herself to me. But I said, you know what? Right now is not a great time. I'm going to get things quiet. She didn't know what that actually meant. And I'll call you back later. Can I call you at 9 o'clock tonight? And I'm thinking, why am I even telling her I'm going to call her back? I don't have time to think, forget. I just need to get through my to-do list of what needs to be, the setup, the flowers, the paper. It's like a bar mitzvah every day. It's Thanksgiving. Whenever I see the big Thanksgiving, I'm having 25 people. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is the weekly. You do this every week. You don't even need to open your eyes. Eventually, I'll be like, how do you do it? I'm like, I have no idea. It just happens. You just get into the routine. Anyway, I'm thinking I need to call her back. Why did I say? I should have just said, given her another number. But I gave it a little bit of thought, and I'm thinking, okay, she's doing a piece in the paper, which means anything I say she's going to misquote. I'm going to make everyone look bad. Miriam Lipskier from Emory said this, and I'm going to get, hate mail and whatever, which is okay. That's life. I'm on campus. We do that. But why did I say yes? And what's the answer? It's a huge question because so many things have changed and evolved. You cannot compare women's lib and what women have accomplished and achieved on a secular level to anything in the past. And I know because both of my parents grew up in profoundly secular homes. I don't come from the traditional, they were religious in the shtetl with, from Moses straight down a line of 39 rabbis. No, on this side they stole, they were horse thieves. They would steal, whoa, that got really loud. They would steal, horses from the Tsar and sell them to the Arabian Nights. And from that side they fought in Vietnam. And this is not the yichus. What am I going to do? I'm going to represent something that I'm going to regret. And things have changed so much. Even, my great-grandmother was the first woman to lead a troop of women in the Easter Day parade in Manhattan to go out in public with pantaloons, meaning pants. So this was 1920, and they were rebelling. And they're going to go out there, and they're going to... Pantaloons, by the way, are probably more modest than most skirts today because they were really loose and frilly and feminine. But, there's big changes going on here. But what she wants to know the Jewish perspective. How is the Jewish role of women changed? And I'm thinking, while things are going on, and finally I'm like, it's 9 o'clock, I need to call her back. So I call her back and I say, do you have a pen? I said, I'm going to tell you my answer. I thought about it, and I want you to read it back to me so that I don't get misquoted, and we're good, yes? She's like, sure, absolutely. I wouldn't write anything you wouldn't be comfortable with, famous last words, right? So I said, your question was, how has women's role in Judaism changed in modern times? And here's my answer. You ready? She says, yeah. I said, it hasn't. Got it? Both words with the period, with the capital? And I hear a very dead silence. And she's like, what? I'm like, it hasn't. She's like, what are you talking about? And she was actually sounded angry. She's supposed to be a journalist with, she's like, what do you mean? That's absurd. So I said, look, you asked me from the Jewish perspective. From the modern secular perspective, there's nothing the same. We're doing things and accomplishing things and running things and buying things and managing things that women in days gone by never imagined or thought possible for women anywhere ever. Huge changes. You can write a book, forget an article on the changes of women. But you want to know if Judaism's perspective on women changed? It hasn't. Have little details changed, with women doing more and that's a whole discussion of more active roles, but the viewpoint, how Judaism viewed women, it hasn't changed at all. And I said, that's my final answer, and I could discuss why I feel that is, in what way I'm saying that, because it does sound a little bit absurd, maybe naive, maybe glossing over a bunch of real issues that exist, and I understand that, and I'm more than happy to sit and discuss with you at a later time. P.S. It's Rosh Hashanah tomorrow. Things are a little busy. Make a long story short, she didn't like what I had to say, and she didn't include it in the article, and she found somebody else who told her, now women are at the bima, and all that jazz, which is true. It's not like I was denying that these things happen. But really, what I discussed with her, and she rejected, but which I believe and I feel is the truth, is that Judaism, at its core, if you had to say, what is Judaism? Everyone will give a different answer. It's cultural, it's national, it's historical, it's religious, it's a place, it's a feeling, it's an environment, it's a group of people, whatever. Everybody has a different term to define it, and everyone's term is true on a certain level. But every term is also incorrect, because you can't say Judaism is a religion if 90% of the people don't practice or believe necessarily in a specific way. You can't say it's a culture if everybody has different matzah ball recipes and different dress, and don't tell me a Yemenite Jew and a Sephardic Jew and an Ashkenazic Jew have so much in common. We do, but we also don't. Don't tell me it's a nationality because we come from everywhere. Don't tell me it's Israel because there's Jews who never went there. Don't tell me it's a language. How many people don't speak Hebrew or Yiddish or whatever? Anything you want to say it is that, but it's also not that. And so in my mind, what I kind of came up with as an answer, and it also has its flaws, is it's not a religion, it's not a culture, a nationality in its full sense. All it is simply is a family. It started out with two people, Abraham and Sarah. We learn about them, their children. It got a little bigger. By the time they came to Egypt, on the way down, there was a head count done. There were 69 people. Pretty big family if they were coming to Thanksgiving dinner. And then by the time they came out of Egypt and received the Torah at Mount Sinai, they went from a family to a nation, to a people. And that's where it got complicated. But it's just a family. And why does that kind of work for me? And there's issues that you can take with that as well. But if you think about it, being part of a family doesn't necessarily mean you love your family, or you get along with your family, or you like the way you were raised, or you appreciate everything about your heritage and your past. Not necessarily. And I remember reading in the New York Times an article that I was like, I had to read it twice because I couldn't believe what it said, that a child who came from a very terrible, abusive home sued his parents for divorce in a court in New York and won. He was granted a document stating he divorced his parents. And I'm thinking, okay, so who are his parents? He doesn't, meaning let's say he moves to, New Zealand and he never speaks to them again. Who are his parents? Whose genes? Whose DNA? What's he carrying inside himself? So it's terrible and it's sad and it's unfortunate that he's not connected from them, but he doesn't have other parents. You can't divorce parents. You could ignore them. You could, neglect them. You could never speak to them, but you cannot not have them. And it's the same thing with Judaism. You could love God. You could hate God. You could agree with what he wants you to do. You could disagree, but there's no out. Students every so often will be like, Judaism's so complicated. Could I just sin my way out? Is there something I could do that someone will say, all right, you're out, you're done? You can't. I said, it's so bad. Even if you convert to another religion, you know how Judaism views that? A Jew who converted. Meaning, this is who you are, and you think you're something else, how unfortunate. You're still Jewish. You can't even get out. There is no way out. Why? Because it's a family. You cannot get out of your family. What you could do is make a decision what kind of family member you want to be. Am I going to call and wish everyone a happy birthday and come to the Mother's Day and the Thanksgiving and the Rosh Hashanah celebration? I could decide how involved I want to be in the family, but I cannot get out of my family. I cannot deny my family, and I cannot divorce my family. And in a sense, that's Judaism. We are a family. We're part of it. Sometimes we like it. We appreciate it. We celebrate it. We're enthusiastic. We love everybody. I love everybody. And sometimes we're like, go away. Leave me alone, right? And so why is this so important? Because if Judaism is in essence a family, when you boil it all down, it's one of the only definitions that in my mind makes sense. Who's at the center of every family? Who's the pillar of every home? On a microcosmic level in your house. Now, your husband may have very fine, he might be disposed to fashion design, and he might have, some interior design capabilities, and he might even be great with kids, and he could change a diaper, and he even likes to cook more than you. That's great. And today, this is all new because you didn't have guys doing dinner and diapers and women, CEO of the company. So this has changed dramatically. But the essence has not changed at all. What is the essence? Judaism is a family and a home. And at the center of every home is a woman. And it doesn't matter if she's outside her home. Her heart and her mind, her capabilities, her intellect, her flavor, her energy, herself, her very essence, defines that space. And it doesn't matter what the four walls look like, or if you're great at design, or what the actual space is. The life and the feel that you get when you walk into a home comes from the woman. And in Judaism, this is highlighted in the most extreme way, because the essence of a human being, according to Jewish practice, not my own, and students argue with me all the time about this, and I'm like, guys, take it up with God. I have a laundry list of things I'm taking up with him. Add it to the list. You are only Jewish if your mother is. Your father could be the greatest rabbi, and your mother, if she isn't Jewish, you are not, unless you convert, and then you're as Jewish as anyone else. You're not 98%, you're 100% Jewish. But that's the only way. You're either born it because your mother is, or you could convert in, and it doesn't matter. Your father could be the Pope. That's technically not possible, I don't think, but whatever. He could not be. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't, you're okay, because let's take this account, because he's not really Jewish, so your status of Jew goes. It doesn't work that way. It's all or nothing, because when it comes to essence, you are what your mother is. What bigger statement to the power that a woman has to influence every generation? She affects their soul. I don't care if you don't cook dinner and you pop TV dinners in, or your husband barbecues. That's not what makes a home. That's housekeeping. You might not be into that. You might hire it out, or your husband might do it, or you might just neglect it altogether. I don't need to know the details. Homemaking is different than housekeeping. And in Judaism, it's not platitudes. It's not excusing, making excuses and trying to make everyone feel good. Oh, you're so special. You're so important. You're on a pedestal. This is real. And the proof of it is almost every activity that takes place within Jewish life, and I say almost, it's really all. But I'm being, I don't want to. You never want to say all or nothing, because it takes place in a home, not in a synagogue. It doesn't matter. A holiday, a Shabbos, a Passover, a bar mitzvah, a bris. You don't need a shul to celebrate Judaism. In fact, you could never step foot into a synagogue and be a fully 100% practicing, ultra-Orthodox, radical Jew. The shul is not where it's at. It's actually more of a modern invention. Judaism didn't revolve. We kind of learned that from a Christian society. You live your life. You do your thing, you have your career, you have your family, your social scene, you go, you come. And when you want something spiritual, when you want something meaningful, you go to the religious institution, the religious location. Where is that location? The shul. And that's where you do the spiritual. And then you go back home, you leave that place, and over there is, where you live your real life. Judaism turns that idea on its head. The concept in Judaism that's most fundamental, it actually says when the Jews were building the tabernacle in the desert, it says, God commanded the Jews, Asu li mikdash, create for me a sanctuary, this temple, v'shachanti bisocham, and I will dwell in them. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist or a Torah sage or scholar to say the English is a little wrong, or the Hebrew. If you're building a sanctuary, you dwell in it. It's one temple. Build me a temple, I'll dwell in it. Build me a temple, I'll dwell in them. It's just grammatically incorrect. The Torah doesn't have, misspellings or errors. It just doesn't work that way. What's God telling us? Build a temple, and I will dwell bisocham. And Rashi, the foremost commentator, says, bisoch kal echad ve'echad, in the heart of every single Jew. Build a home, build a temple, build a sanctuary, not over there or in that location. In your heart, in your home, in your family. That's where Judaism takes place. The good news is, because of our history, which hasn't been so flowery and loving and, beautiful, not to get into what it has been, we've been sent out and kicked out of almost every place we've ever lived, Jerusalem included, obviously. And so if our connection to God came from a location, and that location was burnt down, crashed, destroyed, Kristallnacht, whatever, you name it, we would be leaving our soul behind us, because it's all there in that place. Judaism is profoundly beautiful because everything in it you take in your heart. Shabbat is done wherever you are. It's not in the synagogue. Every holiday, every religious, emotional experience in Judaism is within you, not within the walls. And so when I say women are the pillar of the home, I don't necessarily mean a home, a couch, a an ottoman, some chandeliers. I'm talking what's really a home. When you ask someone what means home, it's a place where I can be me. Everywhere else I have to get dressed up, I have to put on my makeup, I have to go out there and put my best foot forward. The Emory Business School, they actually introduced a new course, which a student started, just like they teach us everything. Number 4 business school in the country, we learn everything. You know what they don't teach us? How we're supposed to look. We're students, we wear Hanes undershirts and black leggings, and at Emory we have our Prada bag and our Vuitton, whatever, but like, we look like the cat dragged us in if we don't have to. And they don't teach us when you go to an interview and you need to look professional, how long your hair should be. So they started a new course, and she made me come and sit and watch. She had models demonstrate what business professional means, what is acceptable, what color nail polish, like basics that really matter because people judge how you present yourself. They didn't teach us, and now they are. When it comes to Judaism, the outside, the externals, the trappings, that's one thing. There's importance to that. I'm not throwing it under the bus, but the essence, what really matters, is what goes on in here, what goes on in the home, not the house. And Judaism has always said, it hasn't changed from day 1 to 2012 and beyond. The woman is the center of all of that. The woman is the pillar of all of that. The woman's entrusted with the details that go into all of that. That hasn't changed, and it will not change. And so when this woman asked me, what's up with the Jewish role of women? Yes, there's details that have shifted because society has shifted dramatically. But you want to know about Jewish women? Look at the first Jewish women. 3,000 years ago, women didn't exist. They weren't recorded in any way. So you look at the Torah and you say, well, it's very patriarchal. There's a lot of discussion about the men and the rabbis. Where are the women? You know what? The fact that we know about so many of them and what we know about them is so profound, even if it's not great in volume and quantity, is unbelievable. The first Jewish woman, when there was an argument with her husband, did women have a voice? Heck yeah. Who said she had a voice? God himself. The verse states straight up, no commentary, no midrash, straight text in Genesis. Abraham and Sarah had a disagreement about a child raised gearing manner, how we're going to take care of our son. Abraham had one opinion, Sarah had the other, and God, most of us don't have God interfering on our team. God says to Abraham, Kol ma shetomar elecha Sarah shma bekola. Whatever your wife Sarah says, listen to her voice. Is that not a powerful woman's voice? Yes, there's not, and we can go through all these different examples. There may be fewer and farther between than we would like, but everyone is profound. Where do we learn prayer from? Hannah. Where do we learn hope and joy from? Miriam. Where do we learn fundamental concepts in Judaism from? Women. And yes, some of them did own land, and some of them were judges, and some of them were prophets, and some of them were Esthers that saved the people. We have it, but when we live in our culture today, our perspective is blinded because we view everything in the context of secular American culture. And if you're looking at it in that way, then things, is this so equal? Is this so fair? Why do men do this and women don't do that? It should all be the same. And that's where all the problems come in. We're not addressing the problems in this class. We're addressing what fundamentally is the woman's role as this pillar of Jewish life and our homes and our family. So there's a little baby camel who looks up at his mother in the Bronx Zoo and says, Mom, I have a question. So Mama Camel says, what? She says, why do we have these big humps on our back? Like, it's so uncomfortable. So the mother says, look, when we travel across the desert and, it's a long time till we get to our destination, these humps are awesome because we can store water in our humps and then we're good to go. So the kid's like, okay, great. Next, the baby camel says, and why do we have these very big eyelashes? What are they there for? So Mama Camel says, in the desert, when there's big sandstorms, our eyelashes protect us, and we don't get sand in our eyes, so we can keep going. We can see. We can. Okay, great. And why do we have these big, bottoms? And the mother explains, because when we have to sit down, we're padded. So the kid looks up at his mother and says, Mom, this is all great. We have all this great equipment, but what the heck are we doing in the Bronx Zoo? Right? And the truth is, so we're saying women are spiritual, and we create a home and a life and the essence of a soul. We create a family. We're where it's at. We always were. Our voice counts. So what the heck are we doing in Bloomingdale's? If I'm the one that's the spiritual voice of the home, why am I so distracted by all the details of life? Why am I running around, getting my nails done, fixing my hair, getting dressed, taking care of all these physical details, these practical things? If I'm so spiritual, and I'm the center of the home, and I'm the voice that God said should be listened to, and I define the next generation in their identity and then also in their practice. If in the South we have a statement, probably you've heard it before, ain't mama happy, ain't no one's going to be happy. Right? If the mother of the home doesn't know where it's at and isn't educated, nobody's going to know anything, and that's why when the Torah was given, interestingly enough, it says, first go and tell the Jewish women, and then go and tell the men. And you got to scratch your head and say, why is that? It's the patriarchal religion. It's all about the rabbis. You want to tell the Torah first, announce it to the women? And the very simple answer is if the women in their homes don't know how to keep Shabbat, how to keep kosher, how to instill these values and morals to the next generation, ain't nobody going to know anything. It's just logical. So it's not just a role that's spiritual and, women imbue the essence of their child with their identity. That's nice. Okay, it sounds very romantic. It's practical also. A woman has to know how to live a Jewish life because then she has to run a home where she's teaching the next generation these very values and principles. And this is an unbelievable idea. We're not just at the center. And a lot of times we go, it's just platitudes. You want to make us feel better. It's not making us feel better. It's real, and it actually comes with an obligation. So then the question is, what are we doing in Bloomingdale's? Right? Why are we so busy with other things? And one of the answers is that the three things that a human being needs to survive, to live, to flourish, is simply food, clothing, and shelter. We all know it takes more to have a meaningful life, and we need to nourish our souls and our hearts and our minds and our relationships in order to live a complete, full life that's full of peace and contentment. But at the end of the day, you need food, clothing, and shelter, or you're not going anywhere. And the beautiful thing about Judaism is with all the commandments that we are given, and for the most part, they're equally distributed amongst males and females. The women we're basically, the only thing that we're told that we're allowed to take a pass on are the things that require a time-bound specific time, because if we're tending to our homes, we shouldn't be obligated to do something that it has a specific time. But almost every other law, mitzvah, celebration, observance in Judaism, women need to learn about, need to celebrate, need to practice. However, there's 3 specific mitzvot that were uniquely gifted, and I say gifted, to the women. Not that men cannot do them, and if there is no woman, a man can fill in. It's not like one of the ones that women are absolved from is circumcision. It's just not something we can do, and commentaries say we were born circumcised, it's a spiritual thing, whatever, we don't need to go there. But practically speaking, if there is no woman, the men can do these, but these were entrusted to the women. What are these 3 mitzvot? In essence, they're the spiritual counterpart of food, clothing, and shelter, not just for the body, but for the soul. And this is something that's uniquely given to women. Why? Because Judaism views women as providing that anchor and that center in a home and enabling the people, the generations, the children that come out of it, or if you don't have children, your contributions to society to be something positive and wholesome. So we're going to basically go through what these things are and why they matter, why they make a difference. I just want to put out there, very often we have a misconception about women in Judaism which comes from outside sources. The one way that you can see it probably as a foundation is the very first woman who ever lived, who ever existed, was who? Chava, exactly, Eve. And we're told Chava was called Chava because Rashi tells us she was Aim Kol Chai, the mother of all life. That was why she got that name Chava. Most Hebrew names translate into English names. Abraham is Avraham, Sarah is Sarah. Chava and Eve is a little bit more of a stretch. Where did Eve come from? I discovered that in the King James Bible it says, Eve is the first woman. Why? What does the commentary there state? Because she was the root of all evil. That's why her name is Eve. And I'm like, what? Chava, mother of all life, that's why she's the first woman. Gets translated somehow or the other to Eve, the root of all evil. No wonder we're so confused with how biblically women are viewed. No wonder there's, some confusion. Mother of all life, creator of all being, instiller of essence in the next generation, doesn't have anything to do with evil, my friends. Not at all. And there's the mayor of Tel Aviv is traveling along with his wife, and there's construction. If you've ever been to Israel, it's like there are always cranes and streets are closed down because building and building. It's a beautiful thing. In 60 years, this country looks, like we're around almost 300. You can't tell. There's a huge construction site, and the mayor of Tel Aviv is walking by with his wife, and as they're strolling by, his wife says, "Hey," and she starts speaking to one of these guys in a hard hat in the, digging. And they're talking and catching up and schmoozing, and he's like, okay, this is interesting, and this is going on. And finally, she finishes the conversation, and they continue to walk. And the mayor says to his wife, "So who was that fellow?" She says, "Oh, well, in high school, we were really good friends, and we were almost going to, maybe get engaged. And then we lost touch, and I haven't seen him for so long. And, it was nice to see him and catch up." So her husband's like, "Aren't you happy you married me? If you would have married him, you would have been the wife of a construction worker." So his wife looks at him and she says, "Oh, honey, if I would have married him, he would have been the mayor of Tel Aviv." Right? Because these things, all the cliches of the woman is the neck and whichever way the head, turns is because of all these cliches. They're cliches, but there's so much truth to them. And it's something that if we take a moment to really think about, it's beautiful to be part, not just of the Jewish people, but to be the feminine aspect of the Jewish people. And all the times in Judaism we say, okay, Shabbat is the expression of the feminine aspect. Isn't Shabbat not the pillar of Jewish continuity and survival and that consistency within a Jewish home every week of doing something spiritual and meaningful, not just an occasional Rosh Hashanah? So getting back to these three concepts in Judaism, these three mitzvot that were specifically given to women. The first one, candle lighting. I'll just go through the three. So we said food, clothing, and shelter. The three mitzvot uniquely given to women is lighting a Shabbat candle, taking challah, which is involved in food and kosher in the home, and the laws of mikvah. Food, clothing, and shelter, but on a spiritual perspective. Again, not physical. So firstly, I guess we could start with food. You need to ingest nourishment in order to survive, basic number one. Okay? There are people who can survive homeless, but you cannot survive without food. So number one, challah, and we don't have the time to go into the length and scope of what these mitzvahs really entail, just kind of a very sketchy outline. Challah requires along with it the details of what does it mean to keep kosher, which in essence tells us that in order to have a spiritual life, what I eat becomes me. What I ingest, you are what you eat, it affects me, and I should be careful that I put things into my body that are good for my body. Today we have, so many people lactose intolerant or diabetic or high cholesterol, and everybody's unique individual situations require a different diet for their blood type, for their metabolism. God also says that with the Jewish soul, you have a unique diet. It's specific to having a Jewish soul. This is what it is. The mitzvah of challah, aside from encompassing kosher, which means how do I feed and nourish my spiritual soul, is very profound. Because what is challah? It means when you bake dough, when you make bread, which a lot of us don't need to do anymore because there's bakeries and food stores that have great bread of every kind in every way, you take off a little piece. That little piece is called challah. Bread is just called lechem. The little piece you took off is called challah. The word challah means taken or removed or separated. You actually make a blessing saying God's name when you take off this dough. What is this all about? So in a nutshell, what is this concept of making a blessing over a little piece of dough that you removed? What this idea is something so fundamental to who we are. The way the Jewish community was set up in years past was there was the temple, there were all the different people who did whatever, the doctor, the lawyer, the Indian chief, whatever their careers were, and there was the Kohen, who was kind of like the rabbi, the priest. He did the service in the temple. Okay, sounds lovely. How did this Kohen survive? How did he take care of his family? Did he get paid? Who paid his salary? The way it worked was the community had an obligation, a shared responsibility to provide everything the Kohen needs. Sounds like the first welfare society, Everybody give a little and then we're going to give the one who doesn't have. It was the exact opposite. It was the biggest privilege and honor to be able to take care of your Kohen and his family and every single family within that community. If I'm taking my kids for new shoes, I'm worrying about the Kohen's kids' shoes. If I'm baking cookies with my kids, I'm bringing over cookies to the Kohen. The Kohen was the most well taken care of, and it was a joy and an honor and a privilege to take care of the Kohen. So it sounds like, okay, that worked because now the Kohen got his stuff taken care of and everybody helped a little bit. But it was so much more than that. It wasn't about the Kohen, it was about us. What did this teach us? your fundamentals, your basic bread, water, whatever you need to survive, don't just worry about yourself. Don't just worry about the needs of your family. Think about the Kohen. Think about what the Kohen needs. Think about another. It was ingrained within our DNA, this concept of giving and sharing. And you know what? We don't have a Kohen now in that system. We don't have a temple. There are Kohens. Anyone with the last name Cohen, Coles, Cohen, they're descendants of Kohanim. But we don't go and give them cookies and bread and shoes. They do whatever we do. However, ingrained in our DNA is this concept of caring about others, and it's still here today. And the proof is in the statistics conducted by, the American Association for Giving. Jews, we constitute less than 1% of the population, but are giving on a global scale. Red Cross. I'm not talking just to Jewish institutions with a plaque. Seymour and the Shirley whatever Wilzig home, whatever it is. No, giving to every relief effort everywhere in the world is completely out of proportion. It's like 30 or 40% of the giving is done by Jews who make up 1% of the population. How incredible is that? And it's not because we all went to the same school and we all had the same values. It's because it's in our bones. It's in our DNA. We were established as a people who in our nature have to think about others and give to others. And you always hear today, I have students all the time, we as I mentioned, we have a tent in our backyard. That's where our Shabbos dinner takes place, because our house only fits about 85, the tent fits 200, so we need a tent and we need a real building, but that requires some funding. So the students, all the time I hear, when I make my first million, Rabbi, I'm telling you, and I'm like, look, Judaism's not about making your first million. In our society, when I do well, when I have everything I need, and my yacht, and my vacation at Bora Bora, and my Cartier, and my kids are in Ivy League schools, then if I have extra, I will give. Judaism says, no. That's nice. That's good. You're a good person. You need to give your bread, your basics, whatever you have for your family. You don't need to give it away. You need to provide for your family, but you need to think and care about others. And sometimes it's not physical. I can't afford. I only have one loaf. I need to feed my family. But I could help. I could share. I could lend a hand. I could lend a shoulder. This concept of giving is so fundamental to Judaism. It's our food. It's our bread and butter. It's who we are. And that concept was entrusted to women to share this value. And you know what? We've done a pretty good job, because Jews are givers. That means the women are instilling whatever background and whatever education we may have had. This idea of helping others and sharing didn't get lost in translation. We're still here, 2012, and every Jewish woman in her own way is instilling that idea. And again, it's so universal that people think it's not uniquely Jewish. Everybody's into giving and sharing and helping, and it's true. It's beautiful. But where does it come from? When it wasn't popular, and when no one thought it was hip, and when no one thought it was cool, and no one was getting involved in the green movement and the purple movement and the pink movement, Jews, with the pagans and the crusades and the feudal society and the nomads, we were popular, we were hip? No, we were always out of fashion, out of sync, out of culture. Today, all of a sudden, it's messianic times, because everybody thinks Jewish values and ideas are the way to go. How awesome is that? So that's food. Then you have shelter. We mentioned briefly, shelter is not just the four walls of your house. Anybody can buy a home, a house, but it doesn't become a home until you imbue your spirit, your energy, your feel. You can walk into a gorgeous mansion and it feels cold and sterile, and you don't want to sit down, you want to leave. You can walk into a small, simple, understated place and it has a warmth and a liveliness, and you just want to be there. So shelter is something about energy more than physical bricks and stones. In Judaism, the concept of lighting a candle, a Shabbat candle, we're told many reasons. We're told Sarah, the first Jewish woman, did it, Rebecca, Leah, all our foremothers did this. This is something, an unbroken train of tradition from generation to generation. They lit a candle. What's the big deal? It's actually popular. You go to any mall today, there's a store, just candles. I remember the first time I passed it and I'm like, just candles? Like, they have some things to put the candles in and to display. Candles, every color, shape, size, scent. They're very popular. I don't think they were. We have electricity. We don't need them anymore. They were definitely out of fashion for a long time. What's the concept of candle? Yeah, there's an aura, and yeah, everyone will prefer a candlelit dinner than to a fluorescent lit dinner, and it's romantic and all those nice things. But practically speaking, halachically, you needed to light a candle because it was related to shalom bayit, peace in the home. Peace on a very practical level. If you don't see and you're tripping over each other and everyone's squinting, it's not going to be peaceful. You enjoy life and you appreciate it when you can see what's there. And there's actually been studies done if you don't see what you're eating, it doesn't taste as good. And when something looks good and it's presented beautifully, even if it's okay, amazing dinner. You know, and that's why presentation is so important. Now, I always crack up when I see people sitting and watching people cooking, and I'm like, guaranteed you don't cook or you would not be watching other people cook. If you cook all the time, you don't want in your spare time to watch others cook, but it's an entertaining concept. It's all about presentation and what you're drizzling and what's coming out of the top and all the stuff that you don't necessarily need for the substance. A home is the energy, it's the environment, it's the light, it's the soul. And in Judaism, the soul is compared to a candle. It says that the soul of man reflects God. Why is that? For many reasons. One simple one is that a candle or a flame is one of the only elements in nature that kind of defies nature in a certain way. In nature, everything that you give, you have less. If I have 10 jelly beans and I give away 8, I only have 2, etc. If I have $100 and I give away 20, I only have 80. It's the rule of nature. You give away, you have less. Somehow or the other, if I gave every person in this room a candle, and I lit my candle, and then I went around and I lit everybody's wick, and I came and stood up here, my flame would be exactly the same size. It doesn't get smaller because I lit everybody else's. And that's the concept of a soul. Sharing of your soul, love, empathy, understanding, caring, you're not diminished when you share and give. If anything, all the light in the room comes together to add more warmth and more energy because we all shared. And the real things in life that matter, the real things that count, are like that flame. Another interesting thing about a flame is in a sense, everything has to follow the laws of gravity. I drop a pen, it lands on the floor. I drop a feather, it's really light, it still lands on the floor. If I hold a flame, you would think the flame would have to go down because there's gravity pulling it down. It goes up. Hold it this way, it goes up. Hold it upside down. You might lash it out, but it'll still try to go up. Why is that? Because that's a soul. It always wants to connect to something higher. It always wants to find meaning and spirituality. It doesn't matter where you shove it, where you hide it, where you bury it. It wants to come out. It wants to be a flame, a light, connected. This concept of a woman lighting a candle on Shabbat seems simple, but it's so profound. You're affecting the energy and the aura of your home. And another beautiful concept is for every child that a couple has. So it starts out, a woman lights her own candle. I'm taking care of my own soul. I take care of my physical existence. I exercise, I shower, I get dressed, I eat, I do those things I have to do in a spiritual way, and I elevate it, but that's a sideshow. And then I need to take care of my soul and the meaning in my life, the value, the relationships, the love, the depth. When I get married, I start lighting a second candle for my husband, because now my scope of responsibility just expanded, and I have 2 candles sitting there reminding me that there's 2 souls that need nourishment and warmth. And the custom is, if God willing, I'm blessed with a child, I add a candle for that child, and every week I'm going to light 3. What does that say to a little kid? They don't know anything, no big, deep philosophical discussions. They see mom lighting a candle, and they know because they're in this world, there's another flame. There's more warmth. There's more life. It's a message that's so profound, and you don't have to say a word. My kids always ask me, is that my candle? Which one's mine? Which one's mine? Now, it's complicated because thank God we have 6 kids, and I'm like, yeah, that one's yours. But everybody has a candle, and we light them all. Everybody here remembers the big Y2K scare. Everyone was worried, save up on water and tuna fish, and everything's going to shut down, and society is not going to be recognizable. As I said, I'm like Amish, so the whole tech thing was beyond me. I'm just like, I'm going to just keep doing my thing and let me know. Send me a memo if something goes wrong. But the New York Times did an article for Y2K, for the Millennium Edition, turn of the century, and what it was a spoof. What they did was, the top of the front page said, 2000, New York Times edition, 2100, meaning 2100. What's the world going to look like in 100 years? And they had a bunch of humorous articles, Cuba demands statehood, robots, equal rights, for robots, old age homes 99 and up demanding whatever, like showing, life's going to be different than we know it, all these different interesting concepts. And at the very bottom, there was one sentence, which was on the New York Times front edition for over a decade, that said, Jewish women and girls candle lighting this week in New York 4/12. And someone forwarded this front page thing to me, and I'm looking, I'm like, that's unbelievable. The New York Times, not a Jewish publication, not promoting Jewish concepts and ideas by anyone's stretch, is predicting that in 2100, all these things about our society are going to be unrecognizable to us, different, weird, strange, unusual. But what's going to be constant? What's going to be the same? What's going to still be predictable? Jewish women and girls, just like 3,000 years ago, who cares if it's 100 years from now, are still going to be taking that match Friday afternoon, Fiddler on the Roof, aura, energy, bringing in a new feeling in their home, a new week, new spiritual strength, and lighting a Shabbat candle. How amazing is that? And this is the New York Times. This isn't, the JLI course that's telling you. This is one of the most respected papers probably in the world, knowing that this is not going to change. Yes, age, people, country, society, all changing. Jewish women lighting candles not changing. Why? Because we are, and we will always be the one entrusted with that ability, with the capability, and with the responsibility to add that flame, to add that light in our homes. And then you have the third mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of mikvah. Taharat HaMishpacha, which is the name that it's called, family purity, beyond the scope of this class. But basically, we have food, and we have shelter. We have a home with energy. Clothing, what do we dress ourselves in? So physically, it's just stuff, material, imported from here or there, paid this price or that price, whatever. The clothing, and this is a mystical Jewish idea, Taharat HaMishpacha, inviting God into your most intimate moments, into the most intimate part of your life, a human being's sexuality that also includes God. It's not like, at the hotel you put a little sign that says private, do not disturb. In Judaism, God is everywhere. In our homes, in our life, not necessarily in the synagogue for us. Everywhere that we are, Shachanti B'socham, dwelling inside of us. Mikvah says we're bringing God into our lives in every aspect of our being. What does that affect? Hasidic philosophy teaches us when a husband and wife agree to elevate every part of their existence, to allow God to touch who they really are, it affects the levushim, which means the clothing of a child that might come from this union. In Hasidic philosophy, what are levushim? Thought, speech, and action. Parents imbue within their children a certain disposition, a certain nature. Forget the nurture for a moment. Certain DNA strands, certain good qualities, certain challenges, physical details about them. Their eyes are their mother's, their fingernails are their father's. These things come into play when a husband and wife are creating a child, which is the most godlike experience a human being could have. And it's supposed to be enjoyable, and it's supposed to be pleasurable, and it's supposed to be something that's incredible, mostly because it's so special and unique. And a husband and wife have the ability to provide their children with garments for their soul. Physical clothing, we of course have to provide our kids. You got to dress your kids, and every 6 months they change size and you need new shoes and new clothes. That we know. But spiritually, their clothing, how they behave, how they think, how they act, is something that's fundamentally impacted by the mitzvah of mikvah. We provide our children with who they are, their essence, who they are, and how they express themselves, what they understand, what they learn, how they interact, their social skills, or their levushim, their garments, of the soul garments, a woman provides as well. Of course, with her husband's help. And so, I just want to conclude with a story. I actually taught Jewish history in a high school in Atlanta for many years. I always loved history. And I came across this piece, which seems a little obscure, but the message had just really stuck with me. It was a story recorded about Queen Victoria, right, Queen of England. She married a guy, I shouldn't say a guy, a prince, a distinguished gentleman. His name was Prince Henry from Germany. He came from Hanover, Germany, and that was her husband. And a pretty short time after they were married, they went on a little tour of his homeland, of Germany. Just like today you have Kate and William, they're going here, they're going to, hold the orphans, kiss the whatever, wave to the athletes, one of those type of tours. So they had a whole entourage, and they were going back to his hometown, Germany. And the queen was 7 months pregnant, but that's not a problem because you got 9 months, so we're going to go for a week or two, no big deal. Sure enough, ironically, what to expect and you're expecting goes out the window because no one expected this. The queen goes into labor. And the entire entourage is in an uproar. This is a disaster of global proportions. Because if the queen has a child, guys, she will. She's in labor. Like, you're not stalling this. You can't organize anything else. and the child's a son, there's a 50-50 chance it's male, his eligibility to the throne of England is in question because one of the rules in the red tape handbook of the royal tradition, you need to be born on mother soil in order to rule. We had this issue with Obama. Are you a citizen? Show us your papers. Hawaii, Uganda, whatever it was. You need to be born here to rule here. She's in Germany. If she's going to have her child in Germany, this is going to be a crisis. So everyone was pulling their hair out. There was one fellow, a Jewish distinguished gentleman by the name of Sir Moses Montefiore. He was head of the Queen's accounting, financial, team, famous Jewish philanthropist as well. And he hears the commotion, and he thinks, what are you going to do? Shucks, you should have thought of that before the journey, whatever. You should have planned. I'm going to go pray mincha, the afternoon service, because I can't help this. Mazel tov. What are we going to do? So he goes to a synagogue in Hanover, Germany. He davens a service, and the rabbi of the synagogue comes over to him. His name was Nathan Adler, and he says, what do we owe this great privilege, this distinct honor, having you visit? And Moses Montefiore says, I'm here with the Queen, and there's actually a big tumult. There's a big crisis because she's in labor and no one knows what to do because we're in Germany, we're supposed to be in England, it's a problem. So Nathan Adler looks at him and he says, I don't understand, what's the big deal? Right here on the coast is the famous British warship. It's called the Royal Ark. Everyone knows a battleship is mother country. You hit our battleship, you hit us. This is ground zero. It's the homeland. Bring the Queen to the battleship. Just to be safe, drive out into international waters a couple kilometers. No one could claim you. Let her have the baby there. It's England. On the British warship in international waters. Simple. Moses Montefiore is blown away. This is brilliant. He runs back, tells this to the Queen, the entourage, all the people in charge of the details, and sure enough, that's exactly what happens. The Queen, they set up a nice little delivery room, I'm sure, on this ship. She has a baby boy, Mazel Tov, and sure enough, Henry V becomes the King of England with no issues about his state of origin, his identity, his birthplace, who he really is. He's English, he's British, he was born on a battleship. Kosher, beautiful, good. Why did this story kind of stick with me? Because it's nice, it sounds beautiful, but what's really profound is the British Empire had at its disposal every expert in every field on every issue they would ever be confronted with. When it came to an issue of identity, who are you? Who are you at your essence? Where did they find the answer to this problem? From a Jew. Why? It's not so shocking. Because Jews have been experts at maintaining our identity on foreign soil everywhere in the world that we have ever lived. That was always our mandate. We live here, we live there, we're sent here, we're on our way to Shanghai, we stop in France, we're kicked out of England, we try to get to Israel, we end up in Australia, we go to, you name it, we're everywhere. Wherever we go, we take our essence with us, we take our value with us, we take our identity with us, and that's why the British Empire had this answer from a Jew. Now, there's a PS to this story. The Queen of England was so grateful for this little advice. She established for the very first time in English history the post of Chief Rabbi of Great Britain. And who did she give this position to? Nathan Adler, the rabbi in Germany who suggested this idea. He sat in that post until he passed away 1892 for like 30, 40 years. And until this day, the Chief Rabbi of Great Britain, today it's Sir Jonathan Sacks, is in that position. This is how it was established. But it leads us with something very fundamental. Jews have always been experts at maintaining our identity on foreign soil, primarily because of the women, primarily because of who we are, what we instill in our children, and that's at the core. And to answer the journalist, that has not changed. Lots of other details have, lots of other new circumstances and positions have come to light and opportunities, and we could argue, we could debate, and it is fair and it's not fair. But that's not what it's really all about. What it's really all about is women provide not just food, clothing, and shelter for their homes and families, but spiritual nourishment, light, warmth, sustenance, and the garments of our souls to the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. So l'chaim to all the holy, beautiful Jewish women in this room, that we shouldn't have to talk about these things. We should just see them all straight up and clear with the coming of Mashiach. May it be speedily in our days.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.